this video, we're going to be creating the final project portfolio for the Web Design 101 class. This is the basic structure of all the web pages that will be included in your portfolio. It'll have a header section, a left menu area, a content area, a right panel area, and a footer. The program we will be using is called Replit. To find it, go to Google, type repl.it. Should be the first one that comes up. Your student should log in using their school credentials. If they are already logged into the Google Classroom, it's already in the background, and they just have to click the Google button. I'm going to use my school account, but your student should be using theirs. Once they get in there, they should already be enrolled in Teams, depending on the class, either period 4 or period 5. And then inside of that, they should have joined or started the Portfolio New project. It'll either say Start Project or Edit. This is the HTML basic shell. It consists of the doc type, an opening and closing HTML, an opening and closing heading tag, opening and closing title tag, and everything that you see on the screen goes in the body. Okay, now we need to add the code for the divisions. We have the header, left side, content area, right side, and the footer. So the header, the left side, the content, the right, and the footer will make up the layout of the website as shown in this picture. We have to add CSS styling before it will look like the final product. W3 Schools is the best website to explore HTML and CSS, how it works, and syntax for the HTML and CSS programming languages. CSS syntax. A CSS rule consists of a selector, which corresponds to a tag in HTML. It will go it can be placed in 3 places. The internal, which is in the header between 2 style tags, an external, which is a link, which we will be using, and then you can use it inline on a tag itself, which we do not use very much. The syntax of an CSS rule is that you have a selector, which corresponds to an HTML tag. You must have an open curly bracket. You can have multiple declarations inside of the rule. So all of these will affect the H1 tag. It'll turn anything with an H1 tag blue, and it'll give a font size of 12. Notice the property is separated by the value with a colon. The value can change, so you can do green, blue, orange, whatever. Font size is another property with a colon, and then you can have different values, and then you must terminate with a semicolon and a curly bracket. Normally we write CSS syntax in this form, where we have the tag and the curly bracket on one line, and each value is separated on its own line, and then you have your closing curly bracket. So we'll be adding our style to the styles.css file that was created when we created the Replit. If you don't have one, you need to create a file over here in the file folders by adding a new file called styles.css. We're also going to open that in a tab so that we have both of them open at the same time. So the first thing we need to do is copy or create a link to this file, and we do that with the link command that goes in the header. And that command is link href styles.css this file name here must match the file name in the file list. Now we are ready to start adding our style to our web page to make it look nice. So now we need to add our first CSS rule. The first one we're going to add is the generic rule using the star that affects all tags. And we're setting the margins and padding to 0 to clear out any default values. CSS styling has the syntax of a tag that corresponds to tags in the HTML index. So this will affect all HTML tags in the index.html or any web page that links to it. And what's this going to do? We're going to be dealing with boxing, so we have to use a code to set the box sizing to border box. That just makes it easier to work with the boxes. First one we're going to deal with, though, is the body tag. We're going to give it, nope. First one we're going to deal with is the header tag. And we're going to deal with is the header tag. This will set up all of the code to give our header a size, a color. Also, when we put in first tag we need to deal with is the header tag. The first thing we need to deal with is the division tag. The first thing we need to deal with is the header tag. This will control the tag in the HTML having to do with the header right here. The style, we are going to give it a background color. We're going to give it a height. We're going to give it a width. We're going to give it some padding. And we're going to make it grow if auto change its height if we add more than 100 pixels of data to it. So let's go ahead and run that. And the way you run it is you open it in a new tab. And now our header has a background color of blue, and the other content is not changed. But this is what CSS does. It will change the way that header in the index file looks. So we didn't change any of the code in the index.html. We just changed the CSS styling. All right, let's add the code for the remaining divisions in our portfolio final. We're going to start with the division. So the header goes on top. In the middle section, we have a left, a content, and a right division. And then at the bottom, we have a footer division. Let's take a quick look at the code. Again, this is our CSS rule syntax, but in this case we are telling it, yes, we're using a tag called division, but we also need to tell it which division we're using. And a pound sign means an ID. If we go back and look at the index, you'll see that we use a attribute called ID with the same name. So we have an attribute or a division with an ID left, a division with an ID content, and a division with an ID right. That is the HTML syntax. I'm going to open this in a new tab so I have both of them open, or drag it and drop it up there. Oh. New tab, so I have both of them open at the same time, so I can jump back and forth between. So I'm going to jump back to the CSS. The way we write that in CSS is we add a pound sign. And you'll see that it actually, when you hover over the top, it shows you what the HTML tag looks like. Inside of this, we have a background color, so that's going to give our background, our left, a different color. These color codes can be found on the internet in lots of different places. There's millions of different color codes, and you can actually hover over the top and pick a color code right off of the website. When you hover, you can see that pop up. Minimum height, 300 pixels. We're going to give a height of auto, which means as we add more content, it will grow. Width of 15%, so we want it to be on the left side, 15% of our total width. This is the important one, float. Whenever you want divs to line up next to each other, you need to float them to the left. And then this color is actually the font color, so it's going to add yellow as any text that we put in there. We can change that later. The content has a different color scheme. Now, the kids were also supposed to come up with a color scheme. There's lots of those out on the web, on the internet as well. Just look up HTML color schemes, and it will tell you complementary colors that work well together on a website. Again, the order doesn't really matter. Here we have color. We have min height again. We have our auto. This is our biggest area. We're going to take up 60%, 60, almost 70% of the screen is going to be our content. And then we have our right side, which has its own color. We're still sticking with yellow, but again, those can change. Same min height, same the fact that it autos, and it's going to take up the remaining 15%. You'll notice that 15 and 68 doesn't quite equal 100, but it's close. Whenever you're trying to fill the screen, we give ourselves just a little bit of extra room to make sure we're not overrunning the screen. And then the footer, notice it is not float, does not have a float, and therefore it will end up below the rest of those. We should now be able to run this and take a look. We're going to open up a new tab, and that is now formatting our web page. Now that we have our basic structure set up, let's start adding some content. I'm going to put a few placeholders in here to let us know where the content is. I put one in for the content. I'm using the P tag, which stands for paragraph. This is the right panel. I did not have one for the left panel, so I'm going to put in the P tag and just say left panel. And I must close that P tag. It should come out yellow because that's what we said in the CSS. So let's go actually take a look at the web page. As you can see, there is no word left panel. It has content, right panel, and footer and header. This is what we had before. But now we're going to refresh the page that we've made those changes, and left panel should pop in. Go back to the project. So when you make changes to the project, you just need to, if you have the web page open in a new tab, you just need to do a refresh and it will update the content. Now, why is the header not yellow like the rest of them? Let's go take a look at our styling and see that we do not have a color in there. So at this point, let's add color yellow. Again, so I've made changes to the CSS. I come back here, it's currently black. All I have to do is a refresh, and now it is yellow. This is enough to get you started and get your content and layout done. I will be making subsequent videos to create a banner header and also to create the left panel menu that we'll be using for all the pages.